Hello and welcome. While we're distracted with day-to-day living, behind the scenes, the United Nations prepares to launch its Globalist Coup Summit for the Future. This plot is a slippery step towards the one world government they've been scheming toward for centuries. As usual, these slithering manoeuvres are marketed with appealing titles designed to mislead and divert focus from the hidden purpose. For example, who'd oppose the eradication of poverty and hunger? Well, of course, no one. But upon examination, it becomes clear that the proclaimed goal is a satanic inversion of what's actually planned. The laudably stated aim is to eradicate poverty in all its forms and dimensions by 2030. This includes ending extreme poverty, defined as living on less than $1.25 per day, and reducing the proportion of people living in poverty by at least half. The summit proposes social protection systems ensuring equal access to economic resources, basic services and sustainable livelihoods for the poor and vulnerable populations. Well, the ugly truth is that such outcomes could and should have been accomplished decades ago, were it not for the manufactured want and deliberately contrived poverty enforced by these UN hypocrites. Of course, no UN ruse would be complete without the woke promotion of inclusivity and equitable education promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. This guarantees that all children complete free primary and secondary education, which we know is indoctrination, increasing access to early childhood development programs and ensuring equal access to technical, vocational and tertiary education. In other words, capturing the entire education system while manipulating curriculums to suit Agenda 2030's treason. They bray about eliminating gender disparities in education and ensuring that vulnerable groups, including persons with disabilities and Indigenous peoples, have equal access to educational opportunities. It also means deranged biological males with mentally crippling vagina envy can use spaces respectfully assigned for female use only. This pandering to perversion is misleadingly promoted as gender equality and empowerment, which sounds harmless enough until the underlying motivation is exposed. They proclaim that achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls is a critical aim of the summit. This removes all barriers to women's empowerment and ensures that women and girls enjoy full gender equality, but fails to mention the inevitable obliteration of women's sports. The summit envisions a world where every woman and girl can realise her full potential and contribute to shared prosperity. You'll note how these lofty proclamations meticulously avoid mentioning sharing toilets, changing rooms and shower areas with deranged biological misfits pretending to be something that they're not and can never be. No utterance from globalism's forked-tongued deception demons would be complete without its core tenet of sustainable economic growth. I suspect the greenwashed trolls concocting this lame propaganda compete to see who can use the word sustained the most times in a single sentence. This summit includes fostering sustainable consumption and production patterns to ensure that natural resources are used responsibly. The target is to create an enabling environment for sustainable development at national and international levels, promoting good governance, the rule of law, and inclusive economic growth. This unsurprisingly segues into lunatic climate action and environmental protection, which again relies on flowery descriptors obfuscating the dark purpose hiding between the lines. Addressing non-existent climate change and protecting the environment with ecocidal wind farms while smothering vast tracts of erstwhile productive farmland with unreliable solar panels are central aims of the summit, albeit carefully couched in deviously ambiguous language. They aggressively demand urgent action to combat fictitious climate change and its imagined impacts, promoting sustainable management of natural resources and ensuring that development and technology respect biodiversity and are resilient to environmental changes. The summit emphasises the need to protect wildlife and other living species and to promote harmony between humanity and nature, but studiously ignores lethally polluting chemtrails, the environmental contamination of neurotoxic water fluoridation, and the permanent destruction of limited water reserves through ecocidal fracking. More cosmetic window dressing underpins the theoretical consequences of the UN Summit for the Future. Successful implementation of the summit's grandiose goals promises reductions in poverty and inequality, improving the quality of life for millions of people worldwide. Without addressing the known causes of these ills, all of the above is ornamental distraction. They state that enhanced social protection systems and equal access to economic resources could empower vulnerable populations and promote social inclusion. Well, sure, they certainly could, but they won't, because that's not part of Agenda 2030's seditious treason. It's glittering wordbait to camouflage the controlled destruction of society. The terrorism of COVID mandates was inflicted by the UN's architects of evil, whereafter no sane person could believe a single word from this black hole of malicious wickedness. Meanwhile, they continue bawling about gender-driven equality and empowerment, wherein achieving gender equality will inexplicably have far-reaching impacts on social and economic development. Oh, wow, who knew? Empowerment, or rather empowered women and girls, will contribute more to effectively communicating and enhancing economies, leading to more inclusive and equitable societies. However, the repetitive overuse of appealing adjectives cannot accomplish these stated objectives. But then again, that is not the plan. Speaking of repetition, here we go again with the slippery doublespeak of sustainable economic growth, supposedly leading to more stable and resilient economies. This highlights how globalism's pathetic propaganda becomes more laughably absurd by the day. Now we return to the raw hypocrisy of purported climate resistance and environmental protection, whereby effective climate action and environmental protection measures could mitigate the imagined impacts of a fake climate change, preserve biodiversity, and ensure that natural resources are managed sustainably. Perhaps they plan to achieve this by gluing themselves to busy roads or rush hour trains. But it's only emotive rhetoric that matters in this meaningless diatribe. In consideration of challenges and risks, the vividly greenwashed implementation and rainbow woke coordination must be front and centre of all action. Achieving the summit's elaborate goals requires close collusion and collaboration among UN puppet governments, captured international organisations, controlled civil society, and the corrupted private sector. Mobilising the necessary financial and technical resources could be difficult, especially for developing countries. But deep state economic hitmen are readily at hand to facilitate desired outcomes because ensuring adequate and predictable funding is essential for the success of the UN's Agenda 2030 initiatives. Political instability, social unrest, and resistance to unsought, unwanted, and destructive change could hinder the implementation of the summit's goals. Addressing these barriers requires repressive freedom of speech, censorship, and tyrannical governance, using mercenary police enforcement thugs completely devoid of moral integrity and human values. Ensuring that progress is disguised so that conspirators avoid accountability for their treason is how colluding criminals evade justice. Developing fake monitoring and evaluation frameworks creates the illusion of transparency and accountability, an essential prerequisite for reaching UN objectives. This fiendish charade is entirely dependent on an obediently compliant public, accepting the UN's Machiavellian plotting without summoning the spiritual fortitude and moral resolution to reject and actively oppose it. This UN summit of satanic sorcery will conclude with their plan for the future, thereby establishing their centuries in the planning coup of the globalist New World Order, a totalitarian one-world government. For those unable to picture what this will look like, the Rainbow Mafia's satanic mockery of the 2024 Paris Olympics opening ceremony provides a cringe-worthy insight. Anyone with moral sensibilities deem this grotesquely obscene debauchery deeply and unforgivably offensive. But remember, that was precisely its sacrilegiously provocative purpose. Thank you for watching.